They came knocking one slow afternoon like they were chasing down a wanted man. But it wasn't the police, just four guys in clashing outfits, trying way too hard to look official. One of them had a badge pinned sideways on his shirt and was wearing flip-flops. They puffed themselves up, talking big about community violations, but honestly, the whole scene felt more like a low-budget stage play than any kind of authority. I still had a wrench in my hand from fixing Mrs. Nolan's water heater, so at first I figured this was some kind of prank. But the longer I watched, the more unsettling it became. When I asked what they were doing on my porch, the tallest one fumbled with a folder, reading off papers like a nervous kid giving a school presentation. He said my wife had already agreed to HOA terms, and now I had to sign a new compliance form or face legal action. His voice cracked, his eyes never leaving the page, like even he didn't buy what he was saying. That's when Emma stepped outside. Calm as could be, she looked him in the eye and said, "We're not even part of your HOA." Just 7 words, and it was like the floor vanished under them. They stammered, shifted around, looking like they'd just been caught red-handed. I pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and turned on speaker so they could hear a real officer's voice. The tough act collapsed immediately. They scattered, piled into a dented old sedan, and sped off. My doorbell cam caught every second, and I managed to grab their plate number. I thought that would be the end of it. Turns out that was just the opening act. The puppet master behind this nonsense? Marjorie Lane, the HOA president. 10 years in charge, clipboard practically welded to her hand, the kind of neighbor who could eyeball your lawn height down to the millimeter. I used to chalk it up to her being overly controlling. That night, I started to realize it was something much darker. The very next morning, an envelope showed up in my mailbox stamped Notice of Incorporation. It claimed our property had been corrected into the HOA due to a survey mistake. 10 days later, another notice arrived saying Emma's roses weren't architecturally approved. 10 days after that, a $500 fine. And then a black rose taped to our mailbox. No letter, no explanation, just a silent threat, "We're watching you." A week later, Marjorie herself marched up my driveway with 3 people trailing behind, snapping pictures of Emma's flowers like they were documenting evidence at a crime scene. I stepped out with my phone recording and told her, "Show me where we ever agreed to be part of your HOA." She dodged, got flustered, started raising her voice. Before it could escalate, an actual patrol car rolled up. Deputy Carter got out, badge gleaming. The moment Marjorie saw him, the color drained from her face. Carter reviewed my doorbell footage of the fake cops, skimmed through her bogus official notices, and then announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, impersonating law enforcement is a felony. This is a criminal investigation. Right then, I knew the tide had turned. But the real game changer came from Emma. She's always been sharper with legal details than me. She dug into her family's old records and uncovered something at the county clerk's office that changed everything. A deed from 60 years ago, signed by her grandmother, granting an easement, an agricultural right-of-way, for what used to be a farm road. That farm road? It's now Willow Bend Drive, the only road in and out of Marjorie's prized HOA community. The deed was clear. The easement was for agricultural use only. Any commercial use required permission and compensation, which meant every single car driving into that neighborhood was technically crossing Emma's family's property without the proper rights. And if Marjorie was quietly cutting deals with developers to expand or sell land, she was bargaining with something that didn't legally belong to her. Suddenly, everything clicked into place: the fake cops, the bogus paperwork, the frantic push to get Emma's signature. It wasn't random chaos. It was strategy. And from that moment, things spiraled quickly. Marjorie launched a private Facebook group branding us as non-compliant troublemakers. Neighbors who once smiled and waved now crossed the street to avoid us. Then she sent those same fake enforcers back, this time with clipboards and a tripod, pretending to run surveillance on our house. They went door to door, asking about Emma's attitude toward community standards. A ridiculous charade, but some people actually fell for it. That's when Carter stepped in again. He caught 3 of them mid-act, dressed in their knockoff uniforms. His voice thundered across the block, "Step away from the vehicle. Keep your hands visible." Within minutes, backup arrived. Handcuffs snapped shut, and the very same guys who strutted around like they owned the place were shoved into the backs of real patrol cars. The whole neighborhood stood outside watching. And slowly, whispers started. Maybe we weren't the villains Marjorie made us out to be. But if you think that stopped her, you don't know Marjorie. She doubled down. Her lawyer filed for an emergency order, demanding the court force us to follow HOA rules for community safety. Reading it made my blood boil. Emma, though, kept her composure. Instead of fighting the order head-on, she played it smarter. She filed for a county easement inspection, a right we had as the property owners. Within days, permit number 1847 was issued. Barriers went up across Willow Bend Drive. Signs posted. Contractors working. All of it fully legal. And that's when the neighborhood truly erupted. School buses couldn't get in. Parents had to walk blocks to collect their kids. Delivery vans clogged up the streets. Confusion turned into anger. Finally, one exhausted dad said out loud what everyone else was already wondering. Wait, this road isn't public? For the first time, they saw the truth. I'll admit, it hit Emma hard. Watching families struggle was never her goal. One night she turned to me and asked, "Are we punishing the wrong people?" And she wasn't wrong. The families weren't our enemies. But I reminded her, Marjorie created this mess, not us. If we cave now, she wins. That tension between us was heavier than any notice or fine we'd faced before. When court day arrived, Marjorie showed up armed with a thick binder, stuffed with glossy maps, doctored surveys, and so-called incorporation records. Her lawyer tried painting us as outlaws, blocking a vital public road. But the judge wasn't swayed by theatrics. "Where is the certified plat verification?" she pressed. The lawyer stuttered, made excuses about county delays, but it was obvious the facade was crumbling. Then it was Emma's turn. Calm as ever, she laid out the original deed, the certified copies, and walked the court through the easement's terms. She explained how those developer meetings for new projects clearly counted as commercial use that required consent, which had never been given. The room fell silent, every eye locked on her. And just when it felt like the scales were tipping, Brandon, the quiet neighbor who never spoke much, stood up. Without a word, he handed us a USB drive, clutching it like it was contraband. On that USB were the smoking guns, emails between Marjorie and Horizon Properties, payments disguised as consultation fees, step-by-step schemes to force compliance and drive out anyone who resisted. Even photographs of Marjorie shaking hands with developers over glossy resort blueprints. She had promised them the entire neighborhood, our road included, in exchange for cash slipped under the table. That was the breaking point. The community turned overnight. A meeting was called, the hall packed with furious neighbors demanding answers. Marjorie tried to shout about standards and order, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of betrayal. A vote was called, and she was stripped of her position on the spot. Horizon bolted within hours, desperate to cover their tracks. At the final hearing, the judge laid it bare: document fraud, conspiracy, and unauthorized commercial use of a private easement. Marjorie was ordered to pay us $80,000, $40,000 for easement violations, $25,000 for legal fees and harassment damages, $15,000 as punitive. On top of that, the court permanently barred the HOA from ever touching our property again. 2 months later, a for sale sign went up in her yard. She had burned through nearly all of the $50,000 Horizon paid her, and the judgment pushed her into bankruptcy. I stood on my porch the morning the movers arrived. Marjorie carried one small box, glanced in my direction, shook her head, and drove off down the very road she once tried to steal. That was the last time I saw her. The neighborhood slowly began to heal. The new board trimmed back the HOA's powers, scrapped absurd rules like flower approvals, and even sent us a written apology. Folks who once avoided us started stopping by again. Brandon, our quiet neighbor, became a true friend. And at the entrance to Willow Bend, a new sign went up: private right-of-way, courtesy of the Holt family. For the first time in years, the street finally felt like it belonged where it should. One morning not long after the doorbell rang, my chest tightened, bracing for another notice or threat. But instead, there sat a basket, cookies, a candle, and a packet of rose seeds. No card, just a handwritten note: you were never part of them. Now we understand why. I stood there holding it until Emma came beside me and smiled. And in that moment, it all sank in. You don't always need to shout or throw punches or outscream your enemies. Sometimes all it takes is an old deed, patience, and the truth. That truth toppled lies worth millions. And now Emma's roses bloom again, not for anyone's approval, but simply because she wants them to. So that's her story. From fake cops on the porch to watching a whole empire of fraud collapse under its own weight. Now, I want to hear from you. If it were your fight, would you put up those barriers and let your neighbors suffer for a while to protect your rights? Or would you back down to keep the peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story hits something in you, hit that like button, share it, and subscribe, because the next story might just make you rethink what it really means to own what's yours.